It's ready, Naina. Over to you.
Okay. Hari Om and good morning. Warm welcome to one and all present here. We are here for the Chinard Student Enrichment Program organized by PG Department of Biotechnology and PG Department of English in association with IQSC. It's our sheer fortune to have with us Mr. Pranay, the acclaimed author of Indica, as a resource person of the day. Today, he'll be enlightening us on the topic, a deep subconscious control, how tectonics and geology shaped our lives. Before we start the session, let me invite Ms. Naina Sahadevan, HOD, PG Department of Biotechnology, to deliver the welcome speech. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Naina. Student enrichment programs conducted at Chinards tries to give a broader perspective to our students, wherein they listen to and interact with people who have made a mark in their respective fields and eventually grow in the process. On that note, let me extend a very warm welcome to the resource person of the day, Shri Pranay Lal, who has proven to be a game changer in every field that he has public health, environment campaigning, literary field, or his passion for art. It is indeed a matter of pride to have such a phenomenal personality.
Hello?
Yes, sir. It's indeed a matter of pride to have such a phenomenal personality amidst us. I welcome you, sir. I would now like to welcome our truly enthusiastic principal, Dr. K.V. Surendran, to this session. Welcome, sir. Next, may I welcome Ms. Naina Narayanan, Assistant Professor, PG Department of Biotechnology, who's a moderator of today's program and also the one who reached out to Shri Pranay Lal and made the session a reality. I would like to wholeheartedly welcome Ms. Shanu Karun, head of the PG Department of English, and her entire team, who has joined hands with us in organizing this session. I take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Anita Haridas, head of the BCA department, and also the IQAC coordinator of our college, who never fails to provide the much needed energy and support for all our programs. Welcome, ma'am. Let me also welcome my ever supportive colleagues and also students of both biotechnology and English department, for whom this whole session is meant for. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I would like to invite our principal, Dr. K.V. Surendran, to address the audience. So, over to you.
Yes. Hari Om. Good morning and a warm welcome to the resource person of the day, Mr. Pranay Lal, author of Indica, and all other viewers. As all of us know, the threat of the pandemic continues to be out of sight. In fact, Kerala leads in the COVID cases reported in the country. However, slowly we are limping back to normal on all fronts, which means from the new normal, we may go back to the old normal very soon. The final year classes are being held on the offline mode, and the remaining classes also hopefully will follow suit very soon as per the present indications received from the university. In spite of all these issues, problems or whatever, the silver lining is that the pandemic has brought us a number of opportunities, and a program like this or this that we are in fact going to listen to is the best example. We are able to listen to and interact with the experts in different fields, both from within and outside the country, using different online platform. I'm sure that the present student enrichment program will be a real booster to the viewers. And I take the opportunity to congratulate all those who worked behind this important program, and a special thanks to our resource person of the day, Mr. Pranay Lal. Thank you.
Next, thank you, sir. Next, I would like to move on to the duty of introducing our resource person, Sri Pranay Lal. Pranay Lal is a public health advocate and a natural history writer. He acquired master's degree in environmental studies and forestry for the University of Oxford and master's degree in biochemistry from Institute of Science, Mumbai. He also has completed short-term courses and certificate courses from foreign universities of high repute. He's been working as a senior technical advisor of the International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease since 13 years. He has a quite impressive profile with myriad roles played over the course of time. He was a policy director of International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, policy advisor, advocacy control of TB internationally, coordinator, Center for Science and Environment, project coordinator of Global March Against Child Labor, Bachpan Bachao Andolan, and consultant, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, New Delhi. He also worked as research associate at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad over a period of time. He has been a caricaturist for newspapers, an animator for advertising agency, and an environmental campaigner. His first book, Indica, A Deep Natural History of the Indian Subcontinent, was published by Ellen Lane in December 2016, which won the Best Non-Fiction Debut Award at the Tata Lit Fest in Mumbai in 2017, Best Book Award at the Delhi Book Fair 2017, The Hindu's Best Non-Fiction 2017, and was named among the top 10 memorable book of the year by Amazon. It also made it to the list of 50 must-read books on India by Mint launch in August 2020. He was also an active participant in various literary festivals conducted across India. For instance, in Jaipur Literature Festival, he have talked on the rise and fall of dinosaurs in India. And in 2018, Kerala Literature Festival, he have given a marvelous talk on Kerala's natural history. Researching across wide-ranging scientific disciplines and traveling with scientists all over the country, he has woven together the first compelling narrative of India's deep natural history, Indica, filled with fierce reptiles, fantastic dinosaurs, majestic mammals, and amazing plants. The story, which includes a rare collection of images, illustrations, and maps, starts at the very beginning from the time when a galactic swirl of dust coalesced to become a life-giving planet and ends with the arrival of our ancestors on the banks of Indus. Pranay Lal tells the story with verve lucidity and an infectious enthusiasm that comes from his deep, abiding love of nature. Virus, an unexpected and outrageous biogeography, is his much as anticipated book, which is awaiting its release. He's also currently working on 2 books, Malabarica, A Deep Natural History of the Malabar, and The Cretaceous, The Golden Age of Dinosaurs. He has several publications in peer-reviewed journals on health, ecology, global trade, and infectious disease to his credit. Sri Pranay Lal always felt the need to inculcate a love for the science in students by creating museums and conserving natural space. An all-rounder and a dynamic personality, we are truly grateful to have you among us to inspire and empower students. On a personal note, after reading his book, I'm deeply moved and mostly grateful for being a part of this mysterious yet marvelous world. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for the generous introduction. I hope I'm audible, and is it
Yes, sir.
clear enough? Okay. I just want to now move to the slide presentation, and I'll switch off my camera because it will make the transmission better. So
Okay, sir.
if you give me sharing rights for the screen, then I will do so.
You can
Okay,
share
sir.
it now.
Okay, I'm just going to figure out how I need to do that. Okay, I'm going to. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you so much, and thank you for the kind invitation and the generous introduction. My talk today is going to talk largely about things that we generally ignore. While we work in our different aspects of sciences, we tend to not consider several other aspects that may have direct or indirect influence on why things exist the way they do. And if you were to inquire about anything, if you are looking at, say, a problem in biotechnology, if you are going to look at, say, thermophilic bacteria and why they survive in certain spaces and not others, and if you were to go into an endless journey of questions of asking why and how, you would realize that certain things would take you either deep back in time, or they would take you to things that are very unrelated to the organism itself. And this is the journey that I have undertaken, trying to understand the deep rooted reasons for why certain things exist the way they do. And in my conclusion, I've realized that many of the things that we take for granted in our lives, or things, organisms that exist, have deeper histories, and they have been shaped by things that we call plate tectonics, which is basically movement of earth masses and the widening of seas, and geology, which means the creation of landscapes, hills, rivers, plains, mountains, beaches, whatever. The whole process of forming a landscape and the rocks and the sands uh, is the whole process of geology. So I'm interested in both of these to understand the deeper meaning for why different plants, animals exist, and how they impact history, culture, and even politics. So I'm going to take you to a whirlwind journey of how I understand the world got to be the way it is. This is the book for those of you who have not seen it. It got released in December 2016. It covers the birth of the Indian subcontinent, and I talk from the earliest times. For those of you who've not read it, I'm going to give you a very brief summary of it in the next 45 minutes or so. Let's start at the very beginning. The earliest time that we know of that Earth existed was something that happened about 5 billion years ago. Two very early formed planetary bodies. They were called Theia and Proto-Earth. Now, when they collided, they formed something that was an amazing explosive event. And both these planetary bodies that collided created perhaps the biggest firework that is ever recorded, at least in our history. There are cataclysmic explosive events happening all over the world, but if you were to ask anything that has happened to Earth, then this is perhaps the most explosive and violent thing that has ever happened. And for about 200 million years, Earth and the planetary body that collided with it, Theia, created a big gaseous cloud of silica and other gases. It is like molten glass that was all over where we are today. So this is what it looked like perhaps 5 billion years ago. Then around 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth began to cool down. All that gaseous matter started to swirl and formed back into a ball, which started to resemble our Earth. And Earth at this time, and the whole galaxy for that matter, the solar planetary system, was still being bombarded by meteorites and asteroids that were coming from all across the space. And this is something what would have looked like about 4.5 billion years ago. This is how the Earth would have looked like. It was molten. The Earth inside was hot, roiling with iron and nickel and cobalt and other metals and non-metals. And wherever it started to cool, you had these black surface rocks that were to form. But these rocks that formed were very temporary. They would again get boiled and heated and taken back inside the earth because, as you know, molten things create a convection current, and rocks that were formed on top were taken back inside, and they were being created and recreated, destroyed and redestroyed over and over again. Now, there is evidence of this on our planet. For example, when a meteorite or an asteroid collides with the surface of the Earth, you generally see a depression. You don't see something that has risen, because if you were to look at something like this, if something event like this would have happened, it would form a boil-like protuberance, something that would have arisen from the bottom of the Earth. The Earth's skin would have had not a depression, but a boil or a pimple-like thing. Now, here's one evidence from which is in India. Now, this is a 3 billion year old crater, but it is not truly a crater because this is actually like a mountain. So it is a collision that happened in Earth, but instead of creating a depression, it actually got raised and looks more like a tiger paw rather than a single round structure that we anticipate meteorites to create, like the ones you have in a place called Lonar in Maharashtra, very beautiful place. It's a circular a meteorite lake created about 70,000 years ago. But for about a billion years, until about 3.2 billion years ago, the Earth was roiling with lava flows and volcanoes that were spewing gases. And when the Earth started to cool, we had these very crusty rocks that you see in the foreground in this picture. But the atmosphere was yet to form, and the sun would shine very bright, and it was an extremely, extremely hot environment. But this is the time when water began to form on the surfaces. So we had small lagoons and many small lakes that began to form. And along the fringes of these lakes, the first signs of life began to appear about 3.5 billion years ago. And but in some places where the earth was still very hot, we had these lava fountains that were forming. And if you look at on the right and the left, you again see these very large snake-like rocks, which are called basalt. So if you've traveled from, say, between Bombay and Goa or Bombay or Pune, you would have noticed those structures, these rocks that are put in layers. They look like layered cake, or a bit like the halwa, the famous halwa that you get in Kerala, right? So it looks like these layers uh, of volcanic rock that has been deposited one over the other. But life had started to form, and there were rocks of these kinds, which were beautiful rocks. This is actually what chemistry in nature looks like. So if you remember, when we were students in the chemistry lab, we would play around with the Whatman filter paper number 1, filter paper number 2. And I'm sure your teachers would have taught you the difference between the porosity and the capillarity of different filter papers. What you need to notice here is that the heaviest substances stay in the core. And as rocks are getting heated from below, the metals that are more solid will stay in the center, and those that are getting pushed out with the eluent. You remember that word that we had used what we were taught in school was an eluent. So like alcohol or water, which carry and separate other lighter material or compounds, they spread outwards. So you've got solid iron and manganese, that black thing that you see in this image, right at the center. Then you see iron phosphorus in that orange shape, and then you've got phosphorus and manganese, which is again reddish, that maroonish color that you see. And you see the lighter the metal gets or the elements get, they move further away on this rock. So it's like a filter paper. Most rocks are arranged like that. If they have been heated and reheated, then you see that effect in many of these rocks. Now, the first lives that we saw emerging uh, began to form along the edge of water, around ponds and lakes that were still very warm and tepid. But the first cells began to form. And this is a rock, which is perhaps one of the oldest specimens of life that formed in India. And there are several such rocks across different parts of India. Now, this particular type of rock is called a stromatolite. Now, what it actually is basically, if you look at these concentric layers, these circular layers, they look like cabbage. You cut a cabbage from the center, it would look something like this, or like an onion. So this onion-like growth is basically layer upon layer building up of cyanobacteria in partnership with some other bacteria, mutually beneficial bacteria, symbiotically growing along lakes and ponds, which were warm but rich with minerals, and there was ample sunlight. What is important about this creature is that all the oxygen that we breathe today was created by this very humble creature. They look like mosses that lie on top of surfaces of our rivers and lakes and ponds and all over the country. But that is the most basic cyanobacteria that is independent living. But if you were to put this in conjunction with a few other mutually beneficial organisms, they would form colonies like these. And this would have covered the entire surface of the earth. In different places at different times, all our lakes, ponds, rivers, and seas and shallow lagoons would be dotted by these colonies of stromatolite. And they produce so much oxygen that around 2 billion years ago, the earth froze. And it is around this time that we also had the ozone layer coming into shape that eventually started to protect all the larger lives that were to come later from the harmful effect of the UV light that was coming from the ultraviolet light that was coming from the sun. So these humble creatures, the first creatures to take root on the soil and rocks and water, were the ones that actually orchestrated all the oxygen that exists on Earth, the free oxygen that exists on Earth. And they also produced ample amount of water. And because they produce so much water and oxygen has this ability to cool the atmosphere, and because they also absorb more carbon dioxide, that additionally also causes more cooling. It caused several successive ice ages on Earth. Now, I just want to remind you that this is where we are today. This is the time when we have most of the new chemicals that are being added on Earth is by humans. So after the Industrial Revolution, we started adding chemicals which are not known to nature, because we are synthesizing uh, chemicals that naturally a bacteria or a fungus or any other small microorganism does not know how to digest. They are products from different aspects of the chemical industry, and as they are processed by humans, there is no natural alternative or a natural pathway for digesting these complex chemicals. And this is what makes the challenge of accumulation of these chemicals, which have no complete environmental life cycle in terms of digestion. The environmental fate of these chemicals remains very toxic to all life. And this is the challenge that we are facing now. So I just wanted to just summarize, like evolution of life from unicellular cell to multicellular cells to metazoans to complex creatures to the arrival of the first vertebrates, minerals too have had a cycle of evolution. So you remember the first picture when I showed you when the earth was colliding and forming and the first moon was forming and the earliest shape of earth was taking place. At that time, it is believed that earth would have had about 350 minerals. But as the crust and the inner core, you remember the image that I showed you of the churning and the fire fountains that was taking place, where material was being circulated from the surface back into the center. That process also added another 1,500 minerals. But when oxygen started to come, when stromatolites and cyanobacteria and many other microorganisms started to add oxygen, we started to have more oxides and peroxides and hypochlorides and all the oxygen derived biomediated minerals, which then made the total tally of chemicals naturally found on Earth to about 4,500. But our arrival, the image that I showed you just previously, the dumps in which we burn our urban waste and all those kind of places, or chemicals that we add to our bodies and to the environment, has added a huge amount of synthetic chemicals, whether they're antibiotics, they're pesticides, they're insecticides, they are food preservatives, all those things that we are synthesizing from nature, or nature inspired from nature, but made within our labs and in our factories, are something that are accumulating either as traces or in very, very large quantities, like plastic, which are now depositing in our rivers, lakes, and of course the deep ocean. And these have no environmental consequences. In fact, they have detrimental, in fact, quite disastrous environmental consequences. And this is something about which nature is not prepared. I'm now going to take you to a 200 million year journey, actually a 300 million year journey. And remember the time when I told you that cyanobacteria were creating so much oxygen that it caused the earth to freeze. Now, this is the last of the major ice ages that took place. Now, I've taken you back about 290 million years ago. The red star that you see at the bottom is where India is just now. India's neighbors were Australia to its east and Antarctica to the eastern coast of India. So from Chennai, it was very easy for you to actually cross into Antarctica. If you were in Calcutta, you could have gone into Western Australia within a day. If you were in Kerala, you could have gone to Madagascar and onwards to West Africa, to East Africa. And if you were in North India, you would be touching parts of Arabia and Ethiopia. So you could have actually, because we were nested between these land masses, it was very simple for us to actually walk across and possibly amble through. But of course, remember, there was no major life at this time. There was life, the earliest ancestors of the reptiles, the amphibians, and even our mammal-like reptiles had emerged. I'm going to show you images of those, so please don't worry. I just want to tell you where the world, how the map of the world looked like, and where the land masses, the modern land masses were in terms of their existence. Uh, just 45 million years later, you notice that the ice is all gone. The Earth is much warmer, and while the land masses are right there, there was these volcanic activities that were taking place all over the world, which was trying to recompensate and dilute the cool climate that existed at the time. Just going to move down, and the forests of the time looked a bit like this. They were all gymnosperms, or plants that were largely comprising these palms, cycads, and horsetails. You can see those very myriad creatures that you notice. Now, if you were to look at the bottom right, there's a palm-like thing that is a cycad. You find an amazing variety of cycases in the Kannur area in Palakkad, and that area we're finding new species of these creatures, and many of them are remnants from those 300 million years ago. And these are the creatures that lived at the time. So on the right, top right, you see this crocodile-like creature that is actually an ancestor of the crocodile. It's called a Chasmosaurus. On the left, you see is a creature which looks very odd, but it's actually an ancestor of the amphibians. It's called a Lystrosaurus. And actually, they were creatures that were like modern day cows. They would go from continent to continent in like a migratory pattern, and browsing on those things that you see at the back, those horsetails. They were active chompers and grazers of all the vegetation that grew around lakes and ponds and rivers. In front, you see a creature that has just hunted another lizard-like creature. That creature is actually our ancestor. It's a mammal-like reptile. It's called a Thrinaxodon. Don't worry about the term. But what I'm trying to tell you here about our ancestor that lived 300 million years ago was that it evolved from a reptile, and it had a scaly tail, and it had poisonous fangs, and it had feet and nails and claws like a reptile, much like, say, a giant monitor lizard. The nails and the hand was a little shaped like what the monitor lizard has today. What is very important is that the genes that existed from then, many of them still survive in us. For example, there is a disease which is called ichthyosis, which we got from fish, and it has since then carried down to all of us. So the gene that causes ichthyosis is actually an aberration that has survived in all creatures. The reason why I tell you about this now is because the scaly tail and the scaly legs of this ancestor, Thrinaxodon, still exists in us. Because if you speak to a dermatologist, and they will tell you that ichthyosis, psoriasis, and even some eczema happens because of an aberration in a gene that is transmitted from mother to child, and it is maternally transmitted. So it's a gene that has carried on from the earliest vertebrate ancestor to us humans, and it will carry on to many, many other creatures. Even birds have a form of an eczema, for example. I just want to now come down to 251 million years ago. Remember, the Earth was frozen around 290 million years ago, and about 255 million years ago, it was nice and green, and we had all these creatures. There was amazing diversity in life. But about 251 million years ago, something remarkable happened on Earth. There was a massive outpouring of a very deadly greenhouse gas called methane. Methane has this ability to cause extreme global warming. It causes a heating of Earth, and the Earth, in a very rapid period of time, about in 1 million years, of course, for us, 70, 80 years is too much of a time. In fact, even 1 year is one long period, but 1 million years in geological time and in Earth's history is actually nothing. But in 1 million years, everything uh, that lived in land and water, virtually everything perished because the earth got heated, the rivers and ponds evaporated, the oceans became very warm, and land had become completely brown. The forests had decimated, and something remarkable happened at this time was that only very, very few places on earth there was some life that survived. And it is this life that carried on the evolution. The future of evolution depended on the survivors of this time. What is also important to note at this time is that at 251 million years ago, all the coal that is produced in India or even in Australia, Brazil, South Africa, the countries in the southern part of this hemisphere that you notice now, was formed at this time because the extinction of large trees, the cycads, the palms, the horsetails, all of them happened and deposited in these lagoons that were drying. And this became the repository of all the coal that exists in India or and the other countries that I mentioned. And we have to thank the processes that happened at this time because they are the ones that have actually given us the source of energy for the industrial revolution and also for all the energy, the electricity that comes into our homes comes from the time when the coal that was formed at this period of time. Just 50 million years later, the land masses started to move a little north. Again, notice that India is marked in that yellow star that you notice. It is still sandwiched between Antarctica, Australia, uh, Africa, and Madagascar. Kerala, of course, from Gujarat to Trivandrum, the whole western margin of India was sandwiched with Madagascar. And this is very important if you are somebody who loves curry mean. This is the time when you notice that the curry mean fish is actually something that Kerala got from Madagascar and vice versa. So there was this exchange of very unique plants and animals like the curry mean. And like I mentioned earlier, the cycads, the wonderful palm-like plants also lived in this junction between India and Madagascar, and the rich biodiversity of the two regions is still pretty similar in some sense. For example, again, frogs and earthworms and fish are very similar between India and Madagascar, especially Malabar region and Madagascar. I just want to go very quickly. Now, what happens is from under the sea, there's this big movement of volcanic activity that takes place, which causes Earth to split. And there's something called the Bouvet plume. Now, plume is nothing like but like a match head coming from the bottom of the ocean, rising to the top of the land surface. And what it causes is that it causes the land masses to split and the ocean to enter because there's a massive volcanic activity that is taking place in the depths of the seas. Now, this is where Bouvet plume is, but if you were to translate this now to where it is on the map of Earth, after this talk, please go and look at something called the Bouvet Island. This is one of the loneliest places on Earth. There's nobody who lives here because it's a very desolate island. It's very windy. It's very close to Antarctica. And the closest human habitation place is Cape Town in South Africa. So, but this is the moment in which Africa split from India and Australia and Antarctica. And there was a channel that started to form between India and Madagascar and Africa. So for the first time, the two land masses actually split open, and and the Indian Ocean started to form at this time. And there's another volcanic activity that takes place about 130 million years ago. And this time it happens closer to where Bengal is, at the border of Bengal and Bihar, in a place called the Rajmahal Hills. Now, again, have a look at them. They're very pretty hills, very beautiful pink rocks. And at this time, there was another island which will form later, takes about 20 or 30 million years for those islands to form. It's called the Kerguelen Islands. Again, very remote, very similar to Bouvet Island, uh, quite in the same latitude as the Bouvet Islands is Kerguelen. Again, a very remote, inhabitable island, very windy, except for a few penguins, very little lives here. But what is important here is that India begins to separate from Antarctica and Western Australia, because this event is the one that tears apart the two or three major land masses that had been joined together for a very long period of time. Now let's look at what the Earth looks like 100 million years ago. Now you start to see that, you can start making sense that, there's North America, there's South America, and Africa is about to join. There is one sea that is cutting Central Africa. And you can see that India and Madagascar still joined together, but Australia and Antarctica have separated. And you can see on the north is China, which is still, a mosaic of land masses, but India, a triangular piece, is very distinct and very visible to all of us. But this is also the time when the grasses make their first appearance. Until now, there were no grasses. Okay, the grasses make their appearance and they make a massive impact on Earth, especially in terms of the geological cycles and the geochemical cycles. The sulfur, the nitrogen, the phosphorus cycle is initiated in a big way by grasses. And what the grasses also do is they create an opportunity for the creatures that were dominated at this time. But the creatures that were dominating at this time were the dinosaurs. But on the feet of the dinosaurs were our ancestors, the pure mammals. The mammal-like reptiles had evolved into our immediate ancestors, the rodent-like mammals that existed at the feet of the dinosaurs. But this is what actually became the engine of evolution. It was the grasses and also the land masses that were creating a lot of opportunity for the creation of the evolutionary forces forming new creatures. And one final landmass that was still joined to us was Madagascar, and that split because there was something called the St. Mary's event. Now, if you are in Kannur, Mangalore is not too far for you, right? Mangalapuram. If you go to Mangalapuram, there is something which is in the sea called the St. Mary's Island. And if you were to go there and see this island, it is a geological wonder. It's a beautiful, beautiful island. And I'm not going to show you pictures of it because what happens then is that a part of this island called Morondova that is created by that volcanic event stays with Madagascar, but a very small part of that Monrova Island comes with us in our part of India. It tags with India as India makes its journey northward. So St. Mary Island actually got created 88 million years ago and lies just west of uh, of uh, the coast of Mangalore. So, and then 20 million years later, the biggest volcanic activity that happens in India, or actually in more recent times, is the Deccan Volcanic eruption. So what it does is now India is closer to the south of equator. And this is still the time of the dinosaurs. No other creature, no other terrestrial creature could dominate the world as the dinosaurs did. The dinosaurs ruled the earth for 165 million years, right? So humans have been there only for about 70,000 years. Okay, so when we say dead as a dinosaur, the dinosaurs actually are laughing at us because if you were to look at their rule, it was far, far larger and they were more diverse and they were more colorful than all of us put together. But the point here that I'm making is that, it needed a volcanic eruption of a very large size to start killing the dinosaur. And then it was a meteorite that struck again. We've been seeing meteorite strikes of very large sizes, but this one, the final nail in the coffin for the dinosaurs, was a meteorite that struck near Mexico. So the Gulf of Mexico that has been created is such a large gulf, and it's been created because of that meteorite. So the demise of the dinosaurs started because of the Deccan volcanic eruption. We started to kill the large trees first because the ash and the greenhouse gases started to kill the large trees because it reduced the photosynthesis, and it ensured that very little sunlight could creep through, at least along the tropics. And then as the temperature started to rise, the trees started to die, the large trees, and then the very large plant-eating dinosaurs called the sauropods began to die. And then the final nail in the coffin is when you have this meteorite hitting the Gulf of Mexico, or rather creating the Gulf of Mexico. So, but there were episodes of Deccan lava flow that happened. So 68 million years ago, 67 million years ago, and 66 million years ago. And this is how Deccan lava would have looked like. It was perpetual darkness. It was ash, and which was, fire coming out of some cracks because there was lava coming through those cracks and raising all these huge plumes that you see, these large gray plumes that you notice that are there all over. And the earth was covered in smoke for thousands and thousands of years, killing very large dinosaurs. And you notice this if you've been to Bombay or traveled by train between Bombay and Pune, or from Goa to Bombay, you would have noticed these beautiful structures. They look like layered cakes, like halwa, very beautiful. And you can see each layer is about 100,000 years. And, if you were to count all of them, it will all add to about 2 million or 2.5 million years of active volcanic eruption, which deposits this ash and molten rock layer upon layer. And then you find these beautiful structures, like this one is near a city of Indore. And this is, a volcanic rock that was cut, a mountain, actually a pure volcano that was being broken down to make small grit and rock for expansion of road. But it is such a beautiful structure that we need to preserve these structures rather than destroying them and making building material and all that, or widening our highways. So we campaigned for this, and we protected some of these 40 or 50 of volcanoes, small volcanoes that exist near Indore. It starts from Baroda and goes as far as Indore. You've got these beautiful structures which need to be preserved. And look at this. I don't know whether you can see on the bottom left, there is a very small man on the left. Please notice to the bottom left. And there is one small white speck with a red dot. That is a man standing there with a turban. What I'm trying to show you here are these tall rocks, which are called the basalt rocks, which you will also see in the St. Mary's Island. But this is made by the Deccan volcanic explosion that happened, or the event that happened 66 million years ago. The ones that you will notice in Mangalore, the St. Mary's Island, is 88 million years, 20 million years older than this one. But the structures that are formed are similar. You get these tall columns of basalt, which look very beautiful. If you were to drive through Madhya Pradesh, across Madhya Pradesh from, say, Indore to Baroda, you will see these structures. And this is what you see in Goa. This is from the lava flow. If you want to see one, it is very easy to see it. All of Bombay is actually a single lava flow. You can even see it in Goa. You can see it in parts of Gujarat. And some lava flow also went right across Indian Peninsula and went into the Bay of Bengal. And you can see that in Rajamundry. And some of the things that we were able to do with this beautiful basalt is because basalt is very soft and you can do amazing work, especially architectural designs. And this is the famous Kailash temple in Ellora, which is made from a single rock and is beautifully carved. And those of you who haven't been to Ellora, you should, because this is one of the most beautiful things that has ever been crafted by man anywhere in the world. People like to talk about the Taj, but I think the Ellora cave, especially the Kailash temple, is as good, if not better, than the Taj Mahal itself. But this is the time when, like I was telling you, that this was the time when our ancestors were playing in the feet of the dinosaurs. And what was interesting was that the dinosaurs were such fierce competitors that our ancestors could not grow larger than rodents, at best no bigger than a small pig. For about 50 million years, our mammal ancestors were only consigned to be in this small shape and very limited growth in size, and they were just ferreting for looking at small pieces of things to survive upon once the dinosaurs had gone to sleep. So we were largely nocturnal or early morning feeders. When I say we, I'm talking about our mammal ancestors during the time of the dinosaurs. Now let's look at what happened after the dinosaurs died. Now, after the dinosaurs died, India continued to move northwards because the uh, activity, the volcanic activity that was taking place under the sea, the Indian Ocean islands largely are volcanic, and they were created by the volcanic processes that were taking place under the Indian Ocean. And this is what was pushing India northwards. And notice that even Africa, on the western part, the eastern part of Africa, was being pushed towards what is going to look like Europe in some time. But you notice that America has now started to take shape. And Australia on the bottom right, you can notice, is also trying to look like what Australia looks now. And what is critical about this time is that there is a massive ocean that exists from Shanghai in China to about Western Europe, where Spain is. So, there's the single long uh, sea, that ribbon-like sea that exists from east to west, cutting right across the world. And this created a very interesting possibility for the evolution of mammals, because see, now the mammals have got extinct because of the Deccan lava flow and the final blow of that meteorite that fell in Mexico. And who could take that place? Because all the dinosaurs, the large creatures, have died. What they left behind were giant birds, land crocodiles, and a handful of mammals to fight for claiming their place as the dominant player on land. Um, the giant birds rule for a very long time. They become rulers of South America, parts of Africa, Madagascar, and Australia. But there were no giant birds, at least we haven't found any yet, in India. We did have flightless birds, but they were not giants. For example, we had flightless birds like ostrich. So it is actually India that gave ostriches to Africa. Once India will dock or land or merge with China in Tibet in another 5 million years, it would send its very interesting cargo of animals into different parts of the world, and of course receive an interesting assembly of animals also. Elephants will go and come in, monkeys, apes, and eventually humans. So that's the interesting bit that is going to happen now. The remarkable thing that caused the evolution of mammals was flowers. So until about 180 million years ago, there were very few flowering plants of the kind that we have now. Only flowering plants that did exist were the grasses, but they were too inconspicuous. Only the seed was the useful part, not the fruit so much in terms of providing nutrition to mammals. But coming of large tropical fruits and flowers created a possibility for mammals to exploit amazing varieties of niches, creating opportunities for expansion of their own bodies. And there was a constant source of nutrition, which earlier was not so. And you would notice that mammals became extremely adept. They were nocturnal at the time of the dinosaurs. So our eyes, for example, are something that are suited for both night and for day. But gradually, some mammals decided to stay on trees and became out and out arboreal, depending on a set of few trees, and devised eating strategies or nutrition strategies that were dedicated to some fruits and some plant products. Some others that became too large had to come down to feed, and they became the ancestors of all terrestrial mammals that actually eventually never went back to the tree. Very gradually, some plant eaters also found a fondness for meat, and very soon cousins were eating their distant cousins. So you would have a related animal. This one is a relative of a pig, but a very distant relative of the pig also became interested in eating flesh because they became facultative eaters or consumers of not just fruit and flowers and grasses, but also flesh. And this is a typical scene from about 38 million years ago from the lignite mines. Now, I know Kerala has lignite mines, and they are also a very good source of fossils. Unfortunately, we've not studied them well, but fossil records from lignite mines in Gujarat, for example, this one is a reconstruction of a very famous fossil site, a lignite mine. I don't know whether you know lignite. Lignite is a poor cousin of coal. When organic matter does not decompose under heat and pressure, it becomes lignite. But if you add too much heat and too much pressure under the depth of soil and rock, it becomes a very good burning organic matter like coal. So lignite is something that stays close to the surface, does not decompose too well, and therefore stays, slightly gray and brown. It is not a very good fuel because it doesn't have the calorific content that is needed, what coal has. Now, I'm just coming back to the lignite mine in Gujarat. Now, this one is called Vastan, and this is how the forest of Vastan would have looked like. It was rich, tropical, had lots of mammals. We found some some remains of bones of birds and a feather of a bird. And we are hoping to find, when I say we, paleontologists who are searching there, to find India's first large flightless bird. But so far, there's been no success. But 40 million years ago, India finally comes and bangs into Tibet, and it starts to raise that white speck that you see north of India. That is Tibet. It has got raised. It suddenly starts to develop ice. Now, notice at the bottom, Antarctica also begins to develop seasonal ice. Also notice there is no Arctic region. Arctic comes very late in the picture. Antarctica is more important in terms of setting the world order, especially in terms of climate and the ocean circulation that happens. Antarctica is far more profound in terms of its importance on setting the global order of the climate that we have today. So once the sea between Shanghai and Spain, you remember the one I told you about, it was called Tethys, but once that closes, it actually causes the earth to start to cool down faster. And as a result, we get the Himalayas to form, and also at the same time, the Antarctica starts to develop its ice. And this is also the time when the earth starts to close down, that the whales that were so far land living, if you notice on the left, there is a creature that looks like a mouse deer. And that mouse deer like creature was challenged to go into water to look for more options for eating. And it develops flippers and tails like a otter, and then takes to water completely. And this becomes the origin of the modern whales. From 50 million years to about 12 million years, all the whales became completely water born. I mean, they took to water completely. You have the completely terrestrial mouse deer like creature that was foraging on around the pond and the lakes, developing this taste for not just water reeds, but even small creatures like crabs and frogs. And then it realizes that the water has far more opportunity for nutrition and for growth. And there is very little challenge in terms of other creatures that are, competing for not only food, but also predating on them, also, challenging them on land. The wise decision for creatures like them, it's not wise, but it is an evolutionary process. There is no um, uh, instinct or drive that is a mental one. It is only a push in terms of evolution that creates this opportunity. So notice that a small pig-like creature on the left becomes a giant whale. The biggest creature ever to live is on your right, the blue whale. Now, as India closed between India and China, we had the sea that existed in between got converted into rivers. So if you look at the Brahmaputra and the Indus. If you were to look at Mount Kailash and you look at the east, there's the Indus that flows like the one that you're seeing here. And you notice these rocks, these very sharp rocks that are in between. Now, this is the seabed that got sandwiched as the two land masses collided. And it's like, putting two toasts together with a lot of butter in between. And when you press that two sandwiches, there is some butter that will flow out, right? So it's exactly like that. The two breads have met, the two plates, which is the Eurasian plate, the China and Tibet, and one side, and on the left is India. When India came and hit China, the, the material from the seabeds rose like this, and it formed our mountains, including parts of the Everest is made from seabed material like this one. But if you were to trace the original outline of India, how big it is from Mount Kailash, okay? And if you look at where the Brahmaputra flows now and the Indus, that is the shape of roughly how India would have looked 50 million years ago before it came and collided with Eurasia and China. So I'm just going to show you, I'm going to take you into a journey. How do I travel and how do I look at the world? I'm just going to take you to a very quick journey to a part of India which I really like. It's called Rajasthan. And in Rajasthan, I'm going to take you from a journey from a city of Jodhpur, the royal city of Jodhpur, to another royal city of Jaisalmer. It's a very quick journey. I'm going to take two different routes. They're marked here on the map. First, I'm going to go northwards, and then I will take the south route. And I want to begin the journey quickly. So I realize that we are running out of time. So just want to be very quick on this. This is how the city of Jodhpur looks. Some of you may have seen it. It's a very beautiful city. It's got lovely palaces, imposing palaces like this one. Notice on the bottom, the rock, which is that you see, it looks very dry. That's because at 750 million years ago, this mountain got created by a volcanic activity. And this is typically how that rock looks. Remember the basalt I told you about, St. Mary's Island, the one near Indore and all those columns? This is exactly that. But this volcanic activity took place 750 million years ago and gave Jodhpur its characteristic look. And as you travel, you find very beautiful surfaces and designs on rocks like this, network of, silica that creeps when it is heated and reheated on a surface of a rock called quartzite. 750 million years ago, this is where India was. I mean, the yellow star on top, again, India is frozen. Only Kerala was possibly nice and warm, like it is today. But notice Greenland, the red star, can you see it in the center? Now, think about it. Greenland today is well north of India. It's towards the Arctic Circle. But 750 million years ago, Greenland was south of the equator, and it was a tropical paradise, while most of India was under ice. But it is this volcanic activity that happened in Jodhpur that liberated India and the rest of the world from a freezing event. And much of the earth again became a tropical paradise because of that volcanic activity which created the city of Jodhpur. So it is very important for us to realize that activities like these, which take place millions and billions of years ago, but have had profound effect on the course of the evolution of life. I then come across this beautiful series of rocks. It contains small fish fossils. I travel westwards. I come to this abandoned phosphate mine. Now notice, on the right, if you notice, there is this rock. It's got these very thin lines, very thin lines running parallel to each other. You'll need to look very closely and you will see those bands. And these are stromatolites. Stromatolites loved phosphate because phosphate, as you all students of at least biotechnology, I don't know whether students of English would remember this, but your phosphate is your carrier of energy, adenosine triphosphate and adenosine diphosphate, ADP and ATP cycle is driven by these, right? And a lot of our enzymes are phosphate based, right? Phosphorus based. So this is where I come to a abandoned phosphate mine. I just stop here for a minute and I find stromatolites, and I find above the layer of stromatolites, these nail-like structures. What are these nail-like structures? They're actually burrows of ancient marine worms. And they are worms that could be molluscan or they could be annelids. It's very difficult to tell because there are no preserved fossils of these because, anything that is soft does not get preserved in its entirety. So we call these fossils ichnofossils or trace fossils. Under a rock, you can also find modern terror like this small scorpion, baby scorpion, but scorpions were among the first creatures to leave the sea and make land their own. They were the first creatures, the first arthropods to colonize land. You come across beautiful sandstone that covers granite. You can see this. This is about 700 million years old. You come across more of these phosphate iron rich soil. The iron came from the volcanic activity that happened 750 million years ago, but it was a very gradual wash, the red rock that get washed and mixed with the orange phosphate. Now, if you notice very carefully, I've put a rock, so near the rock, I've put a 1 rupee coin. Now, closer to, you see some protuberance, some things that are orange and look like shells. They actually are shells, okay? Now, the reason why I'm showing this to you is that the shelly material is made with calcium phosphate rich material. It doesn't contain any iron. And you can notice wherever you see orange bits, they are actually shell from ancient marine seas. Now, all of this is just on the highway. You just have to stop at any point where you see rocks, just get down and start seeing, and you will find incredible stories from the past. A road cut is possibly the best thing that you can see, although they break mountains and destroy landscape in terms of the beauty of it. There are some benefits to it. Now, if you notice, I can see about a 2 billion year history here. You can see granite at the base, that right at the bottom, the big rocks that you see. Resting upon it is a large layer of marine sediment. Above that is a shelly layer of creatures, again, creatures that lived in shallow seas. Then you have another swathe of very thick sediment that possibly washed down from another massive geological event. So what I'm trying to show you here is layer upon layer that has got built up, right? So it is not pure chemistry that is happening. There's also some physics here. Notice that the rocks on top, had this been only chemistry, those big rocks on top that you notice would have started to settle or move downwards. But there's already a packing of sediment, which is actually preventing the flow of those rocks below. I come to this place. It is fascinating. I notice that this looks like a bed of a river. Actually, it is. This is a bed of a river from about 220 million years old. Like I told you, India got covered several times by ice age. Now, this is a remnant of an ice age. This is a remain of an ice age, and you could notice that most of the rocks that you see here are slightly rounded. They're not sharp rocks. The rocks that you see on the left and the right, they're slightly rounded. Now, this is a classic example of the rounding of the rock, because icebergs and glaciers carry rock and very slowly, and they crush rock under the weight of the ice. And as they come closer to the sea, or wherever they deposit them, they leave these rounded rocks in a large deposit like this one, where you find a collection of these rounded rocks. Now, this is a classic example of a ice field that existed millions of years ago. Again, example of pools created in which after some rains, these pools persist, but you can see the roundedness that was created millions of years ago. Again, an example of a rock that was carried and crushed and left with these very clear marks of the pressure of the glacier that was put on it. I come to this dhaba. Now, this eatery, this roadside eatery, has become a bit of a icon, for those who know what it is, because many years ago there was nothing that existed on this road. But then geologists started to come here and they started to look for something that was interesting, and they found that something like this. Now, this may not look very much to us, people like you and me, we don't make much sense of it. But if you look closely, right of that 1 rupee coin, you see a trident like marking, those three sharp markings that you notice on the rock. Now, this actually is a footprint because they found an entire slab about reaching about 20 meters with these footprints. They look like footprints of a chicken. And this was a small dinosaur, the size of a chicken, something like this, that was walking on a beach about 180 million years ago. And on the wet sand, it left its footprints. And it was looking for an early morning meal that the sea must have left. And as it was eating, it left these footmarks and it got preserved in time. When you come to the city of Jaisalmer, it's called the Golden City. And it's called Golden City because the sandstone that is found here is very rich in phosphate. And it has got this lovely squiggly calligraphic look, a little bit like Urdu and, Arabic Urdu uh, characters. But the rock on the top that you see, the yellow rock, is the one that gives the characteristic golden color to the city. It's called the Golden City of India. Again, just to remind you where India was 50 million years ago, about to collide with China, Tibet, and the sea between Shanghai and Spain was going to get closed. And 40 million years ago, it crushes and raises Tibet, creates Antarctica. And I'm going to show you this rock. As the seas were getting closed and the lagoons were draining, it left behind this beautiful set of rocks. Now, this is what I think most men and women now know as something called Multani Mitti. It's called Fuller's Earth. It gives you a very fair complexion, a smooth complexion. Most people, I believe, have used it. I haven't, I don't know. I've used it only to find fossils. And this is the man who owns this fossil mine, not a fossil mine, it's called the Multani Mitti mine, Fuller's Earth, as biochemists would know Fuller's Earth for purification processes. And this is what you find in Fuller's Earth. This is custard apple. Okay, notice custard apple was reintroduced in India by the Portuguese, but it actually originated or possibly existed in India millions of years ago, before climate change caused the local extinction of custard food in India, but it survived in South America, and from where the Portuguese brought it to us in 1600 and 1700. So you can notice this rock, this piece of Multani Mitti. It's actually a very delicate rock. It actually becomes into very soft talcum powder-like soil if you just crush it in your hands. But within it, you find fossils like these, and you find coconut. That's me holding a coconut. Okay, it's an entire coconut. Here, look at it. You can even see the hair of the coconut. Okay, and you find in these mines entire snakes, bats, fish, a lot of other creatures. And as I'm returning, I find one of the rarest blooming mushrooms called Atrophis, which has seldom been seen. I think the last time it was seen by somebody was 12 years before I saw it. And I decided not to uproot it because, the spores will remain in the moist soil. And when there is rain again, it will germinate. So I decided not to pluck it. A lot of my friends said that you should have plucked it because it's a very rare thing to see. And it's one of the few photographs of it that exist. I'm going to now take you to a cultural tour. I just want to, I'm fascinated not only by dinosaurs or how they are found in India or how they existed in India, but I'm also interested in seeing how they were represented in India. Now, these are comics from Bengal, the one on the left, and the one on the right is a Hindi comic. It says, it talks about two characters, Motu and Chotu, and it talks about Anokha Dweep, which is a strange island. So we have been using dinosaurs to explain strange things, things that we challenge our imagination. And things like this appear all over in our comics. I'm sure there are Malayalam comics as well. And there are Hindi films also in which our hero is shown fighting a dinosaur. Now, humans did not exist during the time of dinosaurs, but our fascination with dinosaurs is such that we can create the incredible story of awe and terror by using creatures like dinosaurs. Now, this is from the film. I actually sat through the film and saw it, but I urge you not to see it because it's a very bad movie. It's also made into several movies in the 1960s. This is Bombay Under Attack from a Godzilla-like dinosaur. Then even as recently in 2017, a Bengali film starring very famous Bollywood actors, came out, and this was the creature. Now, the creature cannot be living in a tropical forest. Now, what they tried showing was that one of their friends goes missing, and they hire hunters from all across India to hunt this creature and bring their friend alive. Now, anybody who studies biology will realize that, if you live in a tropical jungle, you cannot be the lone predator living in with such extravagant teeth and spikes and horns, because you would get caught in the trees and your movement would be very difficult. And the teeth that you see in this dinosaur are actually something that you notice in creatures that catch fish. For example, the deep sea fish like to catch other fish with have very large teeth. Very few creatures should have such large teeth, because it is absolutely ridiculous for you to have such large teeth, because you will be injured. Otherwise, there's no point to have these very extravagant teeth and spikes. And so, all in all, I'm sure the director did not talk to paleontologists to come up with a creature like this. Even if he did, I don't think the film would have been a hit, or did better. I mean, that's not the only reason why films do well. Science is not the only driver, but science is something that informs you to not to be ridiculous and come up with such incredibly bad ideas. So I'll just end here, and I'll just try to summarize why do I study deep natural history, and why is it important for us to understand in terms of science. For me, deep natural history, it builds a perspective. Till you do not realize what the value of a rock or soil or a river or a lake is, you do not understand its impact on natural history, why Kochi exists the way it does, and why is Kollam different, and why is Varkala different from Kannur, and why is Mangalapuram made of volcanic rock, and why is Trivandrum on a older rock than, say, Kottayam. Why are the rivers of Pala different from, say, those found in Kannur or in Kannanur or other places? So you will understand things better if you understand how they got there and why they exist in the way they do. I think if you start reading that, you will realize that our existence is only a matter of a very short span of time. We do not have a sense of humility, because we tend to destroy everything in nature. We want to create a road or a highway or a dam. We do it, and we don't understand why nature intended that river to be in the way it did, or that mountain to exist the way it was. There is a reason why mountains exist the way they do. And when we break them or turn them around, or change their course, we are doing it at a risk which nature did not intend us to do. And I think it will help scientists and policymakers to understand deeper and understand things in a much better way, and think forward as well, to understand what could be the larger implications if we change things from what we are doing at the moment. These are my final thoughts. I think what we must do in science and in schools and wherever, I think we need to learn to create an environment of curiosity. We need to de-school education. Currently, textbooks do not encourage critical thinking. We do not talk. When a chemist is talking, the physicist shuts his ears, and the biologist is not even in the room. I think there cannot be any physics without biology. There cannot be any biology without physics, and there can be no space or space sciences without biotechnology. All the sciences are linked. And if we are not thinking of it in that sense, we are going to be in trouble. And I think that our climate problems and our pandemic problems are largely that. We need to therefore break molds. We need to start thinking in the big picture. If you want to understand about why floods are happening in Kerala, think in big terms. Don't think it's only a one-time event. It is a constant problem. Think of it in a larger sense. What can we do in short periods of time? I would encourage every institution to have a small museum, very small museum, 2 rooms, 3 rooms, to tell the story to every child, every student, every person who lives in that district or in that village or wherever, that how did my village come to exist, or how did my district come to exist? And you don't have to have very large museum with very grand dinosaur pieces and all that. Small pieces of rock can tell you better stories. While dinosaurs are attractive, there are small things, from the beaches of Kerala to the small rocks from the hills of the Malabar that can tell you an even grand story. The only thing is you need to understand what that story is and tell it in an exciting way. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for this opportunity. My only urge to students and uh, the staff, the academic, the professional, the professors uh, who are there, who are teaching students, is to stay curious. And no question is a bad question. All questions are great questions. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
It has been really an informative session, and you really had a wonderful way of narrating the scientific knowledge just as in a fairy tale. Thank you so much. And what you said about ichthyosis and karimine was a real eye-opener. Now the session is open for discussion. If anyone want to ask anything, you can unmute your mic and ask, or else you can even post in the chat box. We have only very short time as sir have another meeting, right? So, so please to make it fast if you have any doubt.
I think everyone is clear. They understand the larger perspective of natural history. And if there are no questions, feel free to write to me. And
So, well, if you have time, I do have a question.
sure, go ahead.
So, what do you think will be the status of our world or our Earth after, say, 100 years? Will there be a sixth extinction?
I believe sixth extinction is already taking place. We don't want to recognize it. We don't want to label it yet. But the way we are losing our reptiles, our amphibians, even birds, I think there is extinction already happening in the background faster than what would happen naturally. So I think 100 years is too long. I think a lot of very important creatures that you and I saw would have gone for our grandchildren. So, I was just reading this morning, the journal Nature has reported that in 1997, there were 1.3 million monarch butterflies that left Mexico and reached California. And it's been declining since. And this year, it's been about 3,700 butterflies only. So what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years? We might not have monarch butterflies. So, that's the status. So we don't know.
So, what if the global pandemic COVID-19 is a part of this?
Yes, it is. It is a manifestation of our greed for trade in exotic animals. Like SARS. SARS was exactly the same case. We were interested in, taking animals from Southeast Asia and even Eastern India to China, and the virus is looking to cross over. I mean, it's not looking, but it's just an accident, and we are making those accidents possible more often than before. And this is something that remains a huge challenge. And I don't know how soon humans and human society is going to recognize that animal trade is unacceptable. Animals should live in the place which is designated by nature, not by us. Human agency is not the answer for these things.
Yeah, right, sir. Maybe we are the greatest pathogen of this earth.
That's could be.
So we have just two more questions, if
Yes.
that is okay for you.
Yes, absolutely fine.
First question is by Shreya. She's a student of final BSc Biotechnology. She need to know what is the mystery behind monolith.
Okay, the word monolith, has several meanings. The word monolith in geology means that anything which is made of a single structure. So, for example, several mountains are monoliths. They're single rock, right? So that could be a monolith. But in archaeological terms and in prehistory terms, monolith means anything that is constructed out of a single rock. So mono means one, lith means rock, right? So monolith. So if you're asking the geological terms, monolith gets created because of a single episode of creation of of a landscape. So, like I said, there are several things um in Kerala that are monolithic. St. Mary's Island is monolithic because it's made in a single event, right? So there's all those lovely columns that got created in one event. So that's there's no mystery behind it. I think it's very clearly understood now that. But the only thing is the dating of monolith sometimes becomes difficult, contentious, and the process in which it got created can be contentious. So there are no mysteries per se. It's only that the processes are a little difficult to explain otherwise. I think Aishwarya Ashokan has written that, do you think a part of Antarctica is still mysteriously lingering under the ocean, and whether Antarctica did have an advanced civilization? Antarctica looks very unlikely that Antarctica ever had a civilization. I'm talking about human civilization. I mean, there are penguins and other creatures who I don't want to call not civilized. They are more civilized than us, perhaps. Um, there are parts of Antarctica. I don't know whether you know, Aishwarya, that Antarctica has the highest average elevation. It's higher than Asia. So if you were to combine all the mountains and look at all the land features of Antarctica, their average elevation is higher than all the other continents, and yet there are parts of it that are under the sea level, right? So your point being here that, of course, all continents, as the sea levels will rise, there will be parts that will sink, and we will have places that will have less land mass, and they will get covered with inundated with water, like parts of Africa, India, and parts of Kerala will get inundated with water. So will Antarctica, but Antarctica will largely be outside of the water level, even when all the ice caps melt. Malavika Manoj has asked that, what do you think about evolution in future? Will it be colorful as it was? Of course, it's going to stay colorful. The only question is that we might be creating dead ends for several creatures. For example, lots of monophyletic creatures. For example, the monotremes, for example. The platypus is only one of its kind, right? And there are several birds, for example, they're one of their kind. Now, if they get extinct, there's no evolution for them, right? So evolution can happen only when there is a significant, not just population in terms of abundance, but also variety in terms of species, so that there is interaction between species. So if we are creating those dead ends, we might be curbing the future possibilities of evolution, which is the problem that, like I said, could be because of not only how we are altering landscapes, but also introducing chemicals, a variety of chemicals. So that's a big challenge for us. So evolution in terms of the microbial space will continue to happen. Whether VA exists or not is another matter. But the fact is that the smaller creatures, the challenge just now is, of course, for insects. I mean, insects are facing an assault from human-made chemicals. They may survive climate change, but they may not survive the assault of human chemicals. So that's the real challenge just now. But it's going to stay colorful only possibly for microbes. Professor Naina, I see there are no more questions, and in case there are none, then...
Yes, sir. I think all the questions are finished.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, once more. And now I would like to move on to the last session of calling upon Tirtha of MA English to propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, Tirtha.
Okay, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hari Om. And warm greetings to all the participants of the webinar. On behalf of the Chinards family, I take this opportunity to thank the resource person, Sri Pranay Lal, acclaimed author of Indica, an environmental campaigner, for that power-packed session. The session gave us insights on how tectonics and geology shaped our lives. It was really an informative session, sir. I'm eternally grateful to you, sir, for the very lively and engaging session and sparing your time to be with us today. Thank you so much, sir. I place on record my heartfelt gratitude to our principal, Dr. K.V. Surendran, sir, for encouraging and supporting us in all our endeavors. Thank you, sir.
Welcome, Ms. Tirtha.
Okay, sir. I also thank Naina ma'am, Assistant Professor, the Department of Biotechnology, for introducing the resource person. I take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to Anita ma'am, Head of the Department of Computer Application, for coordinating and hosting the session. Thank you, ma'am. Special thanks to all my dear friends and participants, because without your participation, this event would not have been possible. Heartfelt gratitude for all being with us. Have a nice day. Stay tuned for the next sessions on student enrichment programs. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all. So let's hope for a better future and more beautiful days ahead. So with that, we come to the end of the session. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Mr. Pranay. It was an amazing narration and comprehensible even to a lay person like me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's end the session.